Hello, this is Adrian Jensen for ProductionCrate.com. Today is the third and final video in our series of collaborations with Zombie, if you guys have been following that. This is the one that most of you have been looking forward to. This is the Star-Lord helmet growing on effect. I think it's going to be a pretty good one, so let's get straight to it. So today I'm actually not going to be starting completely from scratch, but I'll give you a quick rundown of what I'm working with. So Zombie sent me a few elements to work with. This first one is just a video of her acting, touching the side of her head there. And then I also have, from another video she sent me of her wearing the helmet, I just grabbed a screenshot of it, freeze framed it, where it's about the same angle that I need for this video here, and I resized it to make sure it's gonna fit properly. And I guess the sun changed a little bit in between takes, so I added an exposure correction to just get those colors back to where I need them to be. And finally, I went ahead and I pre-rotoscoped out her hand and her hair, because you guys have already seen me rotoscope dozens of times and you don't need to see that again, I don't think. Let me just go ahead and trim that to where I need it. All right, so there's two main steps to this effect. We need to animate the helmet and we need to track the face, and they're both like different techniques on their own. So we'll go ahead and start with animating the helmet. I think normally I would track the face first, but I think for the keeping the tutorial concise, animating the helmet might be the way to go. So let me go ahead and pre-compose this, hit Control-Shift-C, and I'll call this ear. And what I'm gonna do is basically for each little piece of the helmet here, I'm gonna animate them all separately. And I'll start with the ear because I wanna, that's the part where she kind of touches. So I'll start with the ear and work my way out to the rest of the helmet. So we'll call that ear and we'll move all the attributes to the new composition. And in that composition, I'm just gonna cut out the ear. Okay, and then I want to grab my pan behind tool and grab the anchor point and move it to the point where it's like the center of mass for this piece that I've cut out. And now I want to head over to ProductionCrate and I want to navigate to the sci-fi section. And we're going to find these clips here that are the digital patterns. See those? And I just want to grab one of those to use for this effect. You can grab all three if you want, but I'm just going to use one. Why don't I just go ahead and pick digital pattern number 1, download that. I can bring that into my composition, and this thing kind of takes too long, so I'll right click it and come up to time and hit time stretch. And maybe I don't want this to take 5 seconds, I might want it to take half a second. So I'm working at 30 frames a second here, so I'll make that 15. Okay, so now that pattern goes by much more quickly. I'm also going to add a tritone effect to this. You don't have to do this if you already like the color, but I do like the color, but it's just incorrect for this shot. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that to blue. And then I can give this an add transfer mode, and I'm actually going to scale it down and make it kind of fit the perspective of the ear here. So I don't actually want to bother with making it 3D, but I'll give it a little bit of a squish. So it's kind of more like it's following the plane of the ear, and that'll be fine. I'll parent it to the frozen helmet layer. And now all I'm going to do is kind of decide how long I want it to take for these individual elements to grow on, which I'll say maybe, half a second. And now for this ear, I will hit S on the keyboard to bring up the scale property. I'll set a keyframe there, and then I'll come to the beginning and I'll change the scale down to 0 so it kind of scales up. And I'll make my last keyframe an easy ease keyframe. I don't want to make both of them an easy ease keyframe because you don't want it easing in from nothing. That just isn't going to look correct. And now that I've decided that my animation of the ear growing on takes half a second, suddenly I don't feel like my digital pattern is long enough. So I'm actually going to right click it, come up to the time stretch, and instead I'm going to change it to be 1 second long. So now the thing's growing on and the pattern is still there after it's already grown on and starts to dissipate after that. So now finally I need to hit this button here, which is the preserve underlying transparency button on my digital pattern layer, and that will make it so that it can't be seen unless it's on top of something else. So it's just using the transparency of all the layers below it, kind of like a reverse track match, which is super neat. So there we go. Now we have the ear growing on. Another thing I can do, maybe add a new adjustment layer, put that below the digital pattern thing, and I'll apply an effect called find edges. Just bring that onto the adjustment layer, and that's going to kind of trace the outline. I can invert that and then copy my same tritone effect from my digital pattern and then change that layer to an add transfer mode as well. And then I'll also set a keyframe here at 1/2 second for the opacity and then come forward and turn it off, and I'll add an easy ease to that keyframe as well. And the purpose of that is so now the digital pattern isn't just random. It kind of also interacts with these blue outlines that actually match piece. See, now it's kind of digitally growing on and it looks more believable. So that's one piece down. Now I basically want to do this for every single piece of the helmet, but I don't have to start from scratch because I have much of the work done already. So what I can do is back here at my project panel, I'm going to make a new folder for organization's sake, and I'll call it helmet parts. I'll grab my ear and I'll put it in that helmet parts folder, and then I'll open up that folder and I can duplicate the ear and I can change the name of it to something else. So let's see, if I just disable this mask here, then we can see what needs to be done next. And I would say kind of the side of the head needs to grow on next. So I'll change the name of this comp to head side. All right, now let's just solo that layer, delete this mask and draw a new mask around the side of the head. All right, and then if I take my pan behind tool, find my anchor point, and I'll move it to a place that makes more sense for this piece. And now if I unsolo that, I also need to scale up my digital pattern. But besides that, now the work is already done. We already did it. So now I have that side of the head scaling up as well. And for some of these parts, you might want to change the animation. Instead of doing a scale, do a rotation or a position animation, just depending on the shape of the part and whatever you think looks good. So basically, we just need to keep on duplicating this and changing the names and changing the animation and changing the anchor points on all the parts until we have a complete face. And since that's going to be really boring to talk through and to watch me do it for a long time, I'm going to do it through time lapse. But so you don't get bored, we did commission a custom song from a very talented and very expensive band. So we'll go ahead and play that while the time lapse is going on. You should go to ProductionCrate. You should do it right now. You probably shouldn't wait. You should go to ProductionCrate. You can use VFX to impress your date. Probably you should go to ProductionCrate. I recommend going to ProductionCrate. You should go to ProductionCrate. I'm sure there's other words that rhyme with crate, yeah. And now that I have all of those done, I will go ahead and highlight all of them, which is easy to do because I cleverly organized them into this folder, and I'll just grab those and drop them on this button here to bring them into a new composition. So let's not click sequence new layers, kind of want those all to stack up, and we want them to be a single composition, and hit OK. Now it all looks blank, but that's because nothing is quite thrown on yet. So there we go. So now what we want to do is we kind of want to arrange these in an order that makes sense, both in time and as far as the layer stack goes. So let's see, I'm going to make use of these solo buttons down here. Let me turn off the audio for all those. So I'll solo the ear because we know that should come on first. So once that's kind of finished growing, I think the side of the head needs to grow out of that. So we'll bring the side of the head to right below the ear and then come to a point where the ear is, on screen. And then let's grab the side of the head and let's move that in time so it's growing from the ear. So it's the ear and then this side of the head, and they can maybe overlap a little bit so there's not like a pause in the animation, so you don't have to just displace them by exact half seconds. So maybe that looks good. And then from the ear, not the ear, but the side of the face, we have these little cheek things that come out. So I'll just grab both of those and then kind of come to where I think they should start growing on, and I'll move them in time so they're in the right spot. Okay, and then these have these little pipes that feed into the chin, so I want the chin to be below those in the layer stack. We'll turn that on and then just move it into the right spot. I hope you guys are following this. This isn't hard to do. It's just a lot of layers to deal with. So I've got that chin coming on. Next, I've got kind of this one layer here that represents most of the face. I got a little bit lazy. If you're doing this at home, you might want to break this up into more individual parts, but I feel like you're going to understand the tutorial just as well if I didn't do that. So I just kept it as one big part, and I'll just move it in time time so it starts coming out of the chin. And then on top of that is the forehead. And as you can see, I animated this forehead to kind of scale upwards from the bottom. But now that I see it with the face, which I have just as kind of a linear wipe, it looks like it's continuing the same motion instead of being its own motion. So actually, I'm going to change that. I'm going to just go into that pre-comp. And this is the cool thing about this technique is you're free to change stuff whenever you want. So I'll just delete this first keyframe and instead I'll change it so that it scales in this way instead of the other way. And that's just a very extremely easy change to make, but I think it's an improvement to the animation. Now, once the face kind of passes where the eyes are, I'll go ahead and have those eyes come in. I don't need to wait for the forehead to finish before I bring in the eyes. It's okay if those overlap. In fact, I encourage it. And then for all the remaining details, I just have this one called face where it just kind of fades on. And I need to have that below everything else so it's not blocking anything that has better animation. And there we go. Now we have the animation of the helmet complete. And this is the part where this effect starts to get, you know, kind of satisfying to us as the people that created it. Because each of these individual pieces is kind of lame to look at on its own and they're easy to animate. But when you see them together, it's a very nice, fluid, complicated looking motion, but it actually was really easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and come to where the animation looks like it's done. And I'm just going to end my composition there. And now what we need to do is go back into our main comp and we'll grab that helmet animation and bring that in. And at this point, we'll notice that the timing might not match up exactly how we want it to. So in the footage here, we can see Zonbi sticks her finger up to her head right there. So that's where we want this animation to start. And let's find where she takes her finger off of her head. That's here. So our animation is actually too long because it should be completely done by now. So this is really easy to handle. We can just right click on that, come up to time and click enable time remapping. And at this point, it's going to make it so the ends and the beginning of your layer aren't stuck fixed points anymore. So that's good. We can just drag this out to the end and that means it's going to last for the whole composition. And we can grab this end keyframe and move it to here. We do have a problem with that causing everything to disappear. And what that just means is that the end of our composition, this pre-comp is empty. So two ways we can fix that. We can either move back one frame and make a new keyframe here and use that as our end keyframe, or we can go into the comp and you can see that these layers actually are cut off at the end. But if we hit Control A to select all those and just pull them out, now they move beyond the end of the composition and that'll fix that little glitch for us. So now we have our timing correct. At this point, you can also easy ease these keyframes if you want. So if we just maybe easy ease that last one, then the whole thing will kind of settle a little bit more and maybe the animation will look even better. All right, that looks fantastic, I think. I know it's not in the exact right spot right now, but we're about to fix that. This is the second main part of the tutorial right here. So for now, let's turn off that helmet animation. We don't need to look at it for a while. And I'm actually going to split this layer because before the helmet starts growing on, there's no need to do any tracking before that point. It would just be a waste of time. So I'm going to move my playhead to right where we need to start the tracking and I'll hit Control Shift D to split the layer. And then let's go ahead and select this rectangle tool at the top, but click that little triangle that's next to the icon and we can use that to change it to an ellipse tool and just draw a mask around her face. And now let's twirl open the properties of the layer, bring open the mask, and we can right click on that mask and click track mask. What we want to do is select the face tracking detailed features. And I'll just come back to the beginning here. And if you hit that play button, the track selected masks forward button, first of all, you're going to notice your mask changes shape. So the mask isn't a perfect circle anymore. It kind of snaps it to the shape of her face. And then also is adding a bunch of teeny tiny little points to each of the individual features on her face. And now this is a lot of information to track, so it might take a while. So I'll just let you know when it's done. Actually, you know what? I apologize for what I said because I did cut out a little bit from that so you didn't have to wait for it, but actually it was really fast. So sorry I said you were slow. I won't say that again, but I will say something else right now that I'm not going to take back. If we go ahead and just highlight this layer and hit U on the keyboard, let's bring that up. Look at all this information it tracked. We have different points for each individual part of the face. For what we're doing, we really don't need all this stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select one point that is kind of rigid on her face. So probably this one here, the bridge of the nose. Let's see if we can find that. Nose bridge. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the beginning and I'm just gonna highlight those and hit Control C to copy those keyframes. And I'm going to close that layer, making sure not to move my playhead. I wanna stay in the exact same spot I already am. I'm going to make a new null object and I'll hit Control V to paste my keyframes, but I made a mistake. I just pasted them onto the object itself. So what it did is it copied the nose bridge effect and pasted it as keyframes in the effect. And that's not what I want. So I'll hit Control Z. I'll hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position, select it, make sure my playhead's in the right spot, and then hit Control V. And now it's going to paste that information to the position of the null. And that gives us information that is way easier to use. Now, if we scroll through, you can see that that null stays locked to her face. It's extremely well tracked. And if you think about it, like it's this part of her face doesn't have any good track points on it. So if we had tried to do that with the point tracker, that would not have worked. So this way of tracking, it gives us more information than we need for this specific application, but it's really nice. So now I'm just going to go back into this layer and hit U again. And I'm going to just delete all that information that we don't need so it's not bogging down the project. I'll just delete this whole effect of the face tracker effect. And the mask, I'll go ahead and turn to none so we can see her whole head again. Now we have our tracking done. Let's parent the helmet animation to the track null, turn it back on so we can see it. And now let's just move it into position. And I already have this roto done, so I can bring the hand and the hair back over the helmet. And I'm covering a little more than I want to up here. So what I did in my original is I just duplicated the helmet, brought it up to the top, and just chopped out this part that I actually do want. And that just saves me from having to fix the roto. This is an easier way to get that done. All right, now playing through that looks really good, I think. I think pretty much we did a fantastic job. That could be the finished effect, but I'm just going to try and solidify this a little bit more. So the way I want to do that is, first of all, on this helmet animation, not the top one that I put the mask on, but the main one, I'm actually going to use a layer style, which I don't think I've ever done in a tutorial before. I always just use effects, but I'll use a layer style. I generally don't use them because they take more time to render than effects do, but they also act different from effects. So if I put an effect on this, since I have this thing parented, all right, how do I explain this? I'm going to do a drop shadow, all right? And I want the drop shadow to always be coming in the same direction. So if I apply a drop shadow effect, just trying to explain why I'm using the layer style instead of an effect. So let's just put this drop shadow on, turn the opacity up so we can see it. I'll move the distance up so you can see it. So there's a drop shadow on this layer. But if I turn this layer, the drop shadow turns with it. And that's not what I want because the sun isn't turning with the layer, so the shadow shouldn't either. So let me undo all that. Now, if I apply my drop shadow as a layer style, I'll come up to layer, layer style, drop shadow. And again, I'm going to exaggerate it just so you can see. So I'll turn up the distance. And now if I grab my rotate tool and I rotate this layer, see the shadow is rotating with the layer, but it's not following its movement. It's staying where it would and should actually be. So I hope that makes sense. And it just occurred to me that we're not actually rotating this in our animation, so this doesn't matter that much, but in the future, maybe that knowing that distinction will help you. So I'll just turn up my distance on this drop shadow a little bit and turn up the size of it. And the size is actually more like the softness of it. And now what I want to do for the color is I'll grab my eyedropper tool and I want to select a color from her actual skin that's in the shadow instead of just using black. If I use this color instead, that'll make the shadow look more realistic. So now I have a shadow being cast by the mask, which was extremely easy to do, but now what I need is a shadow being cast on the mask, which is not going to be any harder to do, but it's going to be a little bit more manual work. And again, you really don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I want to, so I'm going to do it. So now let me add a new solid, and this one I will go ahead and just make black. And we just want to kind of draw some shadows onto this mask. So if I turn the visibility of the solid off, I can see what I'm doing. And first we need a shadow from her hand. So let's just go ahead and kind of draw out a shadow. And I'm going to keyframe my mask path and just make make sure it stays put. And then when her hand starts to move away, I'll go ahead and turn that layer back on. When her hand starts to move away, we're going to keyframe the mask opacity. And when her hand's gone, just turn the mask off so the shadow fades away. And we need to turn up the feathering of that. Now the other place we're going to need a shadow on this mask is from the hair. So let's just draw a shape that follows her hair. And this one we're going to feather out by a lot. And I'm just going to duplicate my helmet layer and I'll use it as an alpha matte for that shadow. And honestly, I think that is about it. I would say that we are now done with the effect. I hope you enjoyed it. I know a lot of you were looking forward to this one. I hope it was worth the wait. I hope I didn't let you down. And I hope to see you again in another tutorial in the future. Make sure to subscribe to Zonbi if you're interested in cosplay at all. She was extremely great to work with on this series. Maybe we'll see more of her on this channel again. And that's it for me. I've been Adrian Jensen. Make it awesome and goodbye. Bum ba-da-dum bum 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 bum. You should visit ProductionCrate. If you don't, we won't be mad. It will be okay. You should go to ProductionCrate and get a pro subscription unless you're a cheapskate. You should go to ProductionCrate. They have lots of content you probably won't hate. You should go to ProductionCrate. Like I said before, you should go to ProductionCrate.